Good evening and welcome to Advanced Searching, the USA Online Library. My name is Julie Evener. I'm the Director of Library Services for the University of St. Augustine. I've been with the university about 5.5 years, and this is my email address up here. This is actually the email address that will get you to just the library in general, so it won't necessarily be me personally that you get when you email library@usa.edu. It'll be any of our staff, librarians and staff members that can assist you. So I definitely recommend. You can also get quicker responses a lot of times through the library@usa.edu email address versus emailing a particular person, just because, you know, for example, if I'm checking my email between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, there are other people checking the library@usa.edu email address longer hours than that. So you could email at 7 p.m. Eastern, for example, and get an answer immediately instead of waiting till the next day. So I really encourage you to email library@usa.edu with your questions. So let's go ahead and get started. Here are some objectives for tonight. After this presentation, students will understand the resources the USA Library offers to assist with literature searching, citations, and writing, understand peer review and how to determine if a particular article is peer-reviewed, be able to use PICO as a guide in identifying keywords, do a mesh search in PubMed when necessary, be able to employ advanced search tactics. That's sort of in general, but we'll get to the specifics on that later. And understand interlibrary loan and how to request an article through interlibrary loan. Now that's something that I address in every session that I do because I feel that it's important that you remember that you have that option and that there's no article out there that's not available to you in one way or the other. So I will mention it toward the end, but I think most of you are probably already familiar with that service, especially if you've attended one of the past webinars, one of the basics webinars, or if you've watch that recording of that later. And if there's anything else, again, since we are a rather small group tonight, if there's anything else that you came to this webinar specifically wanting to know that I'm not covering here, that I doesn't seem like I'll be covering, please do ask me and we'll be sure to cover that as well. Okay, so we're going to start out talking about some USA resources, especially surrounding writing help, citations, that sort of a thing. So let's look at some USA resources. Okay, so I'm taking us to the library's homepage. It's the library tab on My USA, and pointing out the resources here. So I want to first show you the references and writing styles page. Actually, let me first show you. This is a page called Writing Case Reports. So this is, it's specifically written about writing case reports, which is something that a lot of the DPT, entry-level DPT students need to do. But there's a lot of information on here that will apply to writing really any sort of paper or any sort of publication like that. So it's got a section here on research, some tips on understanding that. It's got some links to different resources available through the library. There's a section on the writing process. It's got some good sources for you to use if you need a little bit of help with writing itself. This is a really excellent book, How to Write, Publish, and Present in the Health Sciences. And there's some other good information on here as well. And it also talks about Grammarly, which is a really great resource that the university subscribes to for students. You can go to grammarly.com/edu. The /edu is important. You can't just go to grammarly.com, but you go there and you can register with your USA email address on that page, and it'll let you create that account for free because it'll recognize the usa.edu email, and you'll be able to, basically what you can do is upload your paper or copy and paste some text in, and it'll give you some hints and some tips for for writing, basically, for ways that you could be writing that better. So let me do an example of that. I think I'm automatically signed in. So I'm going to go to grammarly.com/edu. I'm not already logged. So you would go to sign up is where you would go if you haven't signed up yet, and you would definitely want to use your usa.edu email address to do that. Okay, so this is what Grammarly looks like. Come in here. Let me clear this. I'm just going to paste in some text here that I pulled off of the website. And then you can say Start Review. So see, it gives you some explanations and suggestions. So it gives you a lot better suggestions than something like Microsoft Word's going to give you. But at the same time, you still want to read the suggestion and make sure that it makes sense for your paper and what you're writing. So that's pretty neat. You can kind of see, okay, here's so it's got a different, you can click on each section here. Like it says 2 instances of passive voice usage, so it points that out to you. Even passive voice isn't officially incorrect, but it's not the best writing style to use, so it'll point that out to you. There's choices with word choice, it'll suggest that to you as well. You can also look at plagiarism, so you can check yourself for plagiarism using this too. If you're not sure that you've said something in your own words well enough, this will kind of check it for you and give you a hint ahead of time before turning something in whether you need to be concerned about the way you've worded something. So I found some issues, but again, you have to kind of look at it and see, does that make sense for, this pulled it right off the website, didn't it? See, I'm pretty sure that when it did the plagiarism check, it checked it against our website, which is why it's saying the whole thing. So, but anyway, because I just pulled this right off our website. But you can, when you do your paper, that wouldn't happen. So you can paste something here if it's smaller, but you can also upload an entire document and have it check through that way. So really neat tool. It's just a good way to kind of polish up your writing to help you to make sure you're turning in your best work, essentially. Now, if you need help with more than just polishing your writing, I would suggest looking at some of these resources listed here under the writing process on the Rating Case Reports page. And finally, this page also addresses references, your citations, basically. So most instructors or most courses at the University of St. Augustine use either APA style or AMA style. That's the American Psychological Association or the American Medical Association. Typically the OT classes use APA, education like EDD courses use APA. AMA, the physical therapy and health sciences students will largely use AMA. So there's some again, some resources here that kind of can help you with these. One of the best resources, if you're using AMA style, you can click here on this link, AMA Manual of Style. It brings you to our style guide, sort of a most common example sort of a thing. We've got this also for APA, but then if you click here on AMA Manual of Style, you can actually go to the full text of the AMA Manual of Style online. It is going to ask you to log in, just like all of the library resources do. If it's something that's just for our students and faculty and staff, it'll ask you to log in. And you just log in with your USA email address and password as normal. Oh, I didn't like that. Let me try again. I recently changed my password, so I'm not used to the keystrokes yet of my new password. Okay, so here's the AMA Manual of Style. There is a search bar at the top here, but I've tried the search bar. If I'm searching for something particular in the AMA Manual of Style, I'll search for it, and I feel like it's not very good. It'll return results that really don't have anything to do with what I'm looking for, and it gets a little bit frustrating. So what I recommend is going to the table of contents, and then you can sort of browse down to the section that you need. So here's the table of contents. If I'm looking specifically at references, I might want to go to this section, and I can see, okay, how do I cite print journals, and that's there. How do I cite print books? Electronic references is the one you're probably going to use most often, and it's got section on online journals, websites, online newspapers, databases, all different things here, online conference proceedings and presentations. So it'll show you how, give you examples and explain why things are done certain ways in your references for AMA style. That's probably the section that's used most often, but of course there are other sections as well. If you have charts or graphs and you want to know how to visually present your data, there's a section here that'll help you with your writing. What's kind of common style for grammar and punctuation and capitalization in AMA style. Terminology, abbreviations, what abbreviations are commonly used in AMA style, that sort of a thing. So the table of contents is really the most helpful part of this to drill down to the information that you really need. So I recommend using that. Now, unfortunately, and I get this question every time I talk about the AMA manual, I get the question, well, why don't we have the APA manual online? And we would love to. We're kind of waiting and watching to see if APA is going to make their style guide available online to libraries to provide to their students. They don't yet. But we're hoping that they do soon. Now they do sell like an ebook copy. You can buy like a Kindle copy of the APA manual, but those are for individual use, so it's not really licensed for multiple people within an institution to use. So what we've done for now is we've got this great guide here with reference examples, kind of the most commonly used references. You can find here a little bit of information about in-text citations and that sort of a thing, and some resources to give you some extra help on that. And like anything, well, we do have the APA manuals in print on each of our campuses as a reference. So if there's a very particular question that you have and you don't have your own copy of the publication manual, you can always email the library and ask us if there's a certain chapter or a certain page that you need. We can definitely scan that for you and email it to you, so that wouldn't be a problem at all. Just email that about us. On the other hand, the APA Style Guide isn't very expensive. It's not a huge book, and they sell it in paperback, so it's not very expensive, and it's a really good one to have so you can easily reference it as you're writing if you're using APA style. So I highly encourage you to, if you can, get your own copy, and you can use that to make sure that you're really adhering to APA style. Also on the references and writing styles page, let me go back to the whole thing here. One of the great things that we recommend is Zotero. If you've used something like EndNote before, Zotero is similar to EndNote, except it's free. It's an open source software, but it has the same basic thing. It's a citation management tool. So if you have Zotero, you can use it to, as you're going through and searching for articles on a database or wherever you're looking at articles, you can save those to sort of your little Zotero library, and you can tag those and organize them into different folders depending on the project you're working on. And you can also connect Zotero to your Microsoft Word, for example, and it'll insert your citations for you, and it'll create your reference list at the end for you as well. Zotero is something that I actually use every day in my work and in my school, and it's really useful. It's easy to use. We have, last fall, I believe it was, a couple of our librarians did an online tutorial of Zotero. You can click on this button here to watch a recording of that. It's really useful. They give a really great overview of the different capabilities of Zotero and the different options that you have for using it. So that's something that I highly recommend as a way to keep all of your sources organized and also to help you create those citations. There's a couple other tools on here too. Quicka is kind of an interesting one. I've used that before too. It's similar to Zotero, except you can actually save PDFs into sort of a library, and it's a searchable library. So if you've ever been in the position where you're writing your paper and you're thinking of something and you're like, oh, where did I read that? And you're thinking of a certain sentence or a certain point, and you've read it in one of the articles that you were looking at, but you're not sure which one. Quicka is useful for that because you can just do a quick search and it'll pull up the PDF with that sentence in or with that concept in it, and then you know what to cite, basically. So that's useful too, but it depends on what you're looking for, if you'd rather use that or if you'd rather use Zotero. There's also another one, or a sort of an article here, a resource for online tools for organizing and writing a research paper. So it talks about Zotero. It also talks about things like OneNote and Cleverkeys. So that's a resource that you can look at as well. The PubMed Journals and Abbreviations link here is really if you're using AMA style, journal article or journal titles always have to be abbreviated in AMA style. And they use the PubMed or the National Library of Medicine abbreviation. So if you're trying to write out a citation for a journal article that you're looking at and you're not sure what abbreviation or how to abbreviate the journal title, you can look it up here. You can put in the journal title, it'll tell you the proper abbreviation. Likewise, if you have an abbreviation and you're not sure what the full title of the journal is, you can use this to put in the abbreviation and find out exactly what journal that abbreviation is for. So that's an interesting tool as well. There's a couple other things on this page. That's our AMA guide, our APA guide. We also have at least one instructor who likes students to use Vancouver style. Some of the journals, I think manual therapy, it's either manual therapy of journal of journal of manual and manipulative therapy, uses what's called the Vancouver style. And so because of that, this at least one instructor at the university prefers that students use that style. So we've got a little style guide for that as well. But if your instructor doesn't say that you need to use that one, you don't need to worry about it. Some other interesting things, I found this neat social media citation guide. It's got APA, it doesn't have AMA because AMA is not as common. But if you're wondering how do I cite, a YouTube video in APA style, it's got this nice little guide for you down here. Okay, so any questions so far on references and writing style, Grammarly, any of those resources? You can either say your question or you can type it out in the chat box, either way. Let me jump back over here. Okay. So I also wanted to mention, of course, the biggest part, or one of the bigger parts of, writing a research paper or something like that is the databases, the actually, acquiring the articles and that sort of a thing. So we've got a little bit of a list here of some of the databases that we have. You can also find these databases back on the library's page on the Finding Journal Articles page. There's a more complete list of databases here under Online Databases. The couple that I wanted to point out, CINAHL Complete, which is a fairly new one for our university. It's very useful, though. It's specific to nursing and allied health literature. The Cochrane Database of Systematic Reviews is a really great resource, especially if you're looking for systematic reviews. Although the reviews that are in the Cochrane Database of Systematic Reviews are also indexed in PubMed, So if you search PubMed, you can also connect to the Cochrane Systematic Reviews that way. ProQuest is a really good one. We've got other ones that are more specific to different disciplines. The Mental Measurements Yearbook is another new one that's pretty interesting. If you're, for example, looking at using a particular survey, for example, or a certain assessment tool in your research, you can look at that assessment tool up in the Mental Measurements Yearbook and get more information about it, links to actually purchase the permissions to use it, and the actual scoring and the survey and things like that itself. It also has some reviews of the different assessment tools and things that show its validity and reliability and things like that. So that's a good tool. ProQuest Dissertations and Theses Global, if you're specifically looking for dissertations and theses. That's something that's more used by the EDD students. I didn't ask what degree programs you're in, but if you're an EDD student, then this is one that you'll probably make good use of. So we've got all these databases for you as well. So that's just an overview of some of the resources that the library offers to help you, essentially, to be successful in gathering your resources for writing a paper, the writing itself, and citing your resources. And last but not least, we also offer one-on-one appointments with a librarian. So these can be, if you're a flex student, these could be possibly on the weekend when you're on campus, depending on what campus you attend. If you're a completely online student, then this can be, we can do it sort of in this go-to meeting sort of an environment where we might both have webcams and be talking back and forth. We can do it just strictly on the phone. We can email back and forth. So whatever sort of preference that you have in that meeting, we can do that. So you can email library@usa.edu if you're interested in scheduling a one-on-one appointment with a librarian. So just to give you an idea of some of the more common appointments that we have, we often meet with students if they're having trouble finding resources for their topic. If they're feeling like there's just not a lot out there on their topic, we can give them some ideas on how to dig a little bit deeper into the literature. On the other side, we get students who are maybe finding so much information, they're not really sure how to narrow that down, or they're getting lots of results when they search a database, but they're looking through the results and they're having trouble picking out of all of those results which ones are going to be best for their topic. So this is some examples of the kinds of things we can do in a one-on-one appointment. So if that's something you're interested in, again, you can email library@usa.edu. and we can get that set up for you. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit here, and we're going to talk about peer review. So I think probably a lot of you have heard of peer review before, but maybe you don't know a whole lot about it, or maybe you'd like to know more. You might hear other terms such as scholarly or refereed articles, and essentially these sort of mean the same thing: scholarly, peer-reviewed, refereed. They're all indications of the level of scholarship of the article and its trustworthiness. So scholarly means essentially that it's published research typically, or backed up with evidence, and it's for scholars to other scholars, or to practitioners to other practitioners on the best ways to do things based on evidence. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's peer-reviewed. There are scholarly journals that aren't necessarily peer-reviewed. And peer-reviewed and refereed, they'll basically mean the same thing. So the other side of that, if something is not a scholarly publication, it's probably a trade publication. An example of that would be PT in Motion. And this is something that's more, it's more career-based, so it's, there might be an article in there about how a particular clinic is doing, is doing animal-assisted therapy, but it doesn't necessarily have, it's not done in a systematic, scholarly way to show that that is an effective practice. It's just basically talking about this one clinic's experience doing that, for example. So PT in Motion is an example of a trade publication, whereas Physical Therapy is an example of a scholarly peer-reviewed journal. Those are both published by the APTA, but they've got different purposes. There's different reasons they publish different kinds of articles and that sort of a thing. So peer-reviewed, if something is peer-reviewed, it means that before it's published, that article goes to a panel of experts, and they look at it, they look at the methodology, they look at the steps that the researcher has taken in that study, and basically check that everything is done well. Basically, they check that, and it's different journals have different standards, different qualifications, so it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing across the board, but it does mean that a panel of experts has looked at this article before it's gone to publication. So you can be fairly certain that that article, that study has been done in a scholarly scientific way, and therefore the results are probably going to be pretty trustworthy. I have a lot of probablys and most likelies in there because, you know, nothing is a foolproof system. There are and have been, you might have seen some things in the news and different reportings and things like that of kind of hoax articles that get through the peer review system. And that does happen sometimes. But I think that if you're looking at a peer-reviewed article versus a non-peer-reviewed article, you're still just on face value going to want to trust the peer-reviewed one more than the non-peer-reviewed one. At the same time, you would still, of course, want to look through that article yourself, read the methodology and the results, and make sure that, you know, you agree with the way that the study has been done. So it's not a substitute for you looking at the article in depth yourself, but it is a way to sort of quickly narrow results to make sure that you're seeing what's most likely to be reliable. So how do you know if something is peer-reviewed? There's different ways. You can check the journal's website. If they're peer-reviewed, they're going to tell you most likely. So it's a badge of honor to be a peer-reviewed journal, and they're not going to hide that fact. So if you wanted to know if a particular journal was peer-reviewed, you can go directly to that journal's website, look in the About section, and there's going to be some information saying, you know, what sort of peer review process they use, or it'll say a peer-reviewed journal about, et cetera, et cetera. Another way to do that is some databases have filters where you can either filter by scholarly or peer-reviewed depending on what database it is. Any questions about peer review? Okay. You're a very quiet group, so either you're bored or you're enthralled. I'm not sure which one. So we'll keep going forward then. If you do have questions, please feel free to type in the chat box or, you know, unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. Got a little bit of leeway since it is a smaller group tonight. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is a specific strategy to know how to, or to know what keywords to put into a database search. This is a question that I get a lot. You know, students come and say, well, I have this question, you know, I have this topic, but how do I know what words are important to put into my database search, which ones to leave out? You know, how does that work? And it's a good question because databases are a little bit more precise, particular than something like a Google search. You can't put the same sort of things into a database search as you would into a Google search. For example, you wouldn't want to put a question into a database search. You wouldn't want to put full sentences and a lot of non-important words like it or they or, you know, things like that in. So it's a little bit tricky sometimes to figure out what is important enough to put into that search and what can I put in to the search so that my results are going to be relevant to the question that I'm asking, and I'm not going to have to sort through a bunch of results that aren't really applicable. So anyway, so this concept to help you narrow down your keywords is called PICO. This is also used for other things. So you might have heard this before in some of your courses, the PICO system. In my case, I teach it to use as a system for isolating keywords to use in a database search. So PICO stands for, the P is your patient and or population, the I is your intervention or treatment, the C is a comparison if there is one, and the O is the outcome. So for example, then the P would be, what condition is it? What disease or condition or health problem is it that you're looking at? Or is there a particular population? Is it children? Is it elderly? You can look at that in the P as well. The intervention is going to be your treatment. What are you doing about the P to make things better, essentially. So your intervention or your treatment, sometimes there's a comparison. You might be comparing two specific treatments to see which one is more effective. In that case, you would put the C, you would put that comparison in as the C. You won't always have a comparison, and that's fine. You can leave it blank if there isn't one. And then your outcome is, what do you want the end result to be? What is the goal here? So you've got this population, you've got this problem, you apply a treatment to it. What are you hoping that treatment will do? So if we use this, you guys are going to be typing in the chat box in a minute here, because I'm going to ask you to look at PICO for the following scenario. Is manual therapy an effective treatment for rehabilitation of low back pain in the elderly? So what is your patient, problem, and or population in this situation? Okay, geriatric low back pain. Ray says elderly. That's half of it, right? Because that is our population that we're looking at. But yeah, so low back pain, someone else says. Yeah, so elderly low back pain is probably what we're looking at. So that addresses the problem that we're addressing, low back pain, and the population that we're addressing it in, which is elderly. You're not always going to have a population that's specific, which is fine. Okay, so what is the I? What's the intervention? Manual therapy. Very good. So is there a comparison in this case? Are we directly comparing manual therapy to another type of treatment specifically? No, we're not. So that would just be kind of a blank in this case. And what end result are we hoping for? This one's always a little bit tricky. Okay, rehabilitation is really what we're looking at here. And Naomi said that rehab from back pain, but you can simplify that just to rehabilitation. So we're hoping that our treatment, the manual therapy, will help these patients to get back to the state that they were before they had low back pain, essentially. So rehabilitation would be our outcome here. And so there's parts of this question that we haven't really addressed. Effective, we didn't really have anything. Treatment is sort of a keyword that we left out. And these words aren't really going to be necessary or effective in our search, so there's not really a reason to include them. So the words that we came up with: elderly, low back pain, manual therapy, rehabilitation. So these are the keywords that we would want to put into a database search. So in some cases, I've had people, students who say, okay, if the problem was low back pain, then our goal is to decrease the low back pain. So they'll put, decrease low back pain. The problem with something like that is putting something like decrease or strengthen isn't always a good they're not always good words to put into a database search. So you really want to boil, what the PICO helps you do is boil down your situation into just the most important parts of your question, of your scenario, so that you know what to put into the database search. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay.
So this is, I have a hard time with this. If you're looking for something like strengthening, like, and I think I asked this prior, like transverse abdominis strengthening or neuromuscular education, a better word then would be rehabilitation because it's much more general?
Not necessarily. It's going to really depend on the situation, but a lot of times if you're talking about ways of strengthening a muscle, you don't even need the word strengthen, you just need the muscle in your database search. So you don't even necessarily need to specify, oh, I'm doing this to strengthen a muscle. In a lot of cases, something like, we wouldn't be doing manual therapy to increase low back pain, for example. So increase or decrease, it's not really important to specify either one. It's the same thing with strengthen. You're not necessarily going to be doing a particular exercise to weaken a muscle, so there's not really a reason to specify strengthening or weakening, and having the muscle itself or the region of the body is really going to be more important than specifying what you're doing with that muscle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if you were going to do something like that, then you would just say, like, your P would be like a multifidus, and your, where I get mixed up.
Okay, so the problem would be that particular muscle or part of the body. Sometimes in especially databases like PubMed, naming a specific muscle is going to be too specific, so you might want to say, leg instead of, particular part and particular muscle in the leg, or you might want to say low back instead of a particular muscle in the low back. And the intervention would be, if there's a specific, if you want to say just exercise, or if there's a specific kind of exercise you're looking at, or a specific treatment or technique, then you put that in the intervention. If you had another intervention you were comparing that to, that would be your comparison. And officially your goal, your outcome would be to strengthen that muscle, but strengthen's not going to be an important enough word, and you've already named the muscle, so it would be sort of repetitive to say it again. So in that sort of a case, you would have an O, but you wouldn't necessarily use any of the words for the O in your keywords.
Okay, so you may not have anything at all for O, because you're repeating. You would be repeating it.
You would have an O, you just wouldn't carry those words over into your keywords, because it would be, again, it would be repetitive in that case.
Okay,
yeah.
Right. Your O might be strengthening, but because you already put that earlier, then you're obviously going to put it again.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we're going to try this search. I'm going to do it two different ways. I'm going to do a basic PubMed. We're going to go into PubMed. I'm going to do a basic PubMed search using those keywords. And then we're going to go a little bit advanced. This is the advanced session, so we're going to go advanced, and we're going to talk about mesh searching. And I'm going to show you how to do a basic mesh search. So I'm going to go to PubMed. By the way, in case you don't remember from the basic webinar, it's always a good idea to go to PubMed through the library's website. That way you can see the University of St. Augustine filters and be able to connect to our full text directly through PubMed. So that's always a good idea to do. Okay, so the keywords that we had from our scenario, we had elderly, low back pain, right? Yeah. Sorry, now I forget. Okay, elderly, low back pain, manual therapy, and rehabilitation. Okay, so I'm putting them without any sort of ands or ors or anything like that, and that's going to depend on the particular database you're using. In PubMed, it's better to just put the words and nothing else. No punctuation, no connecting words. of course, want to leave out anything like in, the, of, those sorts of a thing. They're not going to be helpful to your search, so you might as well just leave them out. And in some cases, they could kind of mess up your search a little bit, especially with the way that PubMed searches. So in PubMed, I'm just going to put that string of keywords. If you remember from, if you went to one of the basic webinars that I've held over the past few weeks that addressed CINAHL, you remember that in CINAHL, if you're going to do multiple words like this, you want to go to the advanced search rather than the basic search. But since we're dealing with PubMed specifically tonight, we're just going to put that in, and we're going to click search. And we got 212 results. Remember, you have filters over here that you can use to narrow that. You've got the University of St. Augustine filter that you can click on to see all of the articles that are immediately available through our library. But my point in showing you the basic search today is so we could see how many results that we get, and then we're going to compare that to how many we get when we do a MESH search. So MESH stands for Medical Subject Headings. Essentially, let me pull this back up here. All right, so I want you to type into the chat box here, what do you call this beverage that is depicted in this picture? Soda. Who else? Another soda? Got all people from the same region here tonight? Okay, so my husband's from the Midwest, and he says pop. Yep, Ray does too, pop. I live in the South. I'm not Southern, but I live in the South, and so around here a lot of times it's just Coke. No matter what kind it is, it's Coke. You know, sometimes people will call it tonic in some regions of the country. So the point is that there's lots of different ways to refer to the same thing, right? And we see this in other cases as well, where physical therapy in some regions of the world is called physiotherapy. It's the same thing, but it's two different words for it. So we see this a lot. So this is why medical subject headings, MESH subject terms, are important, because there could be 5 different articles that are all talking about the same thing, but using a different word to describe that same concept. So if you're doing a search and you just put in the word, you know, if you were searching for, let's say, the health effects of soda on children, and you put in, you know, soda, what if there was an article that talked about soda but called it soft drink, or it called it something else? If you're just doing keyword matching in a basic search, then you're not going to find that article because it never mentions the word soda, even though that's what the article's about. So as you can see, it's important to have some sort of a what we call controlled vocabulary. So part of the beauty of databases and the fact that they are organized and purposeful is that as articles are put into the database, somebody is looking at them. So if we're specifically talking about PubMed, for example, there are people called indexers who work for the National Library of Medicine or work for the National Institute of Health. I'm not sure exactly who employs them, but human beings, and they actually go through the articles that are put into PubMed. They read them, and they assign them official subject terms. So if an article talks about soda the whole time in the article, it uses the word soda over and over again, somebody from PubMed, who works for PubMed, one of these indexers, is going to read this article and say, okay, so one of the key terms and one of the key concepts in this article is carbonated beverages, and that's what PubMed calls it, carbonated beverages. So they'll assign the key term, the MESH term, carbonated beverages, to that article. Let's see an example in real time here. Got to find a good one here, I think. Yep, this one will work. So here's an article. If I scroll down on it, it's got a section, Publication Types and MESH Terms. So I can look at the list of MESH terms. These are the official subject headings, the medical subject headings, that have been assigned to this article by a human indexer who knows that carbonated beverages and soda are the same thing. So we can see the ones that have asterisks next to them are considered major subject headings. This is what the article is mostly about, but it also has to do with adults, males and females, humans, pain measurement, patient satisfaction, questionnaires. So somebody has gone through and assigned all of these terms to this article to make it easier to find, no matter what sort of a term you're using to look it up. So different ways that we can use MESH. The easiest way, or the least complex way, but not necessarily always the most efficient way to use MESH, is if you do a basic keyword search like we've already done. If you find one article that you say, well, this article is about just what I want it to be about, it's just what I'm looking for, you look at it, look at the MESH terms, and now you can look at which ones are major subject headings of this article. You can copy them, paste them into the search bar, and do your search again, but using those terms instead of the ones that you came up with on your own. So you're basically speaking the same language as PubMed in this case. You're using PubMed's vocabulary to talk to PubMed, and so theoretically you would get then better results because of that. So that's one way you can use MESH. You're using MESH terms, but you're still doing a basic PubMed search, a keyword search, because you're still using keywords. So the difference here is that when I'm typing in words up here, it's just a keyword search. So PubMed is searching for those words in any of the what we call fields of this database. So a field in a database is something like journal title, article title, authors, abstract, subject headings, things like that. So if I'm doing a keyword search, then PubMed is going to look for a match to the keyword that I put in. It's going to look in the title of the journal. It's going to look in the title of the articles. It's going to look in the abstract of the article. If I'm looking for something on the use of walkers with the elderly or something like that, then I might get articles that are by this guy Walker because it's looking in the author field as well. So it's going to be looking in all of the different information it has about the article. So as you can see with sort of the Walker thing, that's not always going to give you the most relevant results. So what you can do is a more sort of complex but really effective in a lot of cases search is you can build a MESH search so that PubMed, you can tell PubMed to only search this field right here. So only look for the words that you're putting in the MESH terms field, and it won't look in any of the other fields for those terms. Before I show you how to do that, let me say that I don't think that MESH search, building a MESH search, is always or even often necessary. Most of the time in PubMed, you can get a very good search just doing a keyword search. Times where you might want to use a MESH search are if you're doing a keyword search and you're still getting an overwhelming number of results, and you're searching through those results and they don't seem to be as relevant to your topic as you'd like them to be. You're finding a lot of sort of outliers that aren't relevant to your topic, and you really don't want to go through all of these articles, especially if half of them aren't what you're looking for. So that's a case where you might want to try a MESH search. Another reason, once you've mastered MESH searching, another reason you might want to do one is just to do something more quick, to get a quicker result of something that's, you might get only 20 results as opposed to 200, but those 20 results are going to be a lot more definite. So if you need maybe one or two good articles on a topic, a MESH search might help you get to those one or two articles a lot quicker than doing a keyword search and then hunting through several pages of results. But as I said, I don't think you always need to do a MESH search. And I think you would only want to do a MESH search if you're feeling sort of stuck, sort of overwhelmed, you're feeling like the results that you're getting back aren't what you need. In that case, a MESH search is probably going to be helpful for you. If you're already getting very few results, a mesh search is definitely not going to be helpful because it's going to give you even fewer results. So how do I do this mesh search? Well, basically, I'm going to take the words that I've already established, my keywords that I've already found, which were elderly, low back pain, manual therapy, and rehabilitation. And what I want to do is I want to find out how does PubMed talk about those concepts. What does PubMed call elderly? What does PubMed call low back pain? So that's the idea. To do that, we're going to go back to PubMed. Notice up here we've got PubMed selected. PubMed is one of the databases that the NCBI does. If I pull down the drop-down menu, you can see all sorts of ones, most of which are not very useful to us, but some of which are. So instead of selecting PubMed, I'm going to select MESH. So now when I put in a search term, I'm not going to be searching for articles. I'm going to be searching for a match to that concept, sort of like looking something up in a thesaurus. I'm not going to see, articles that contain that word. I'm going to see what does PubMed call this concept. Let's start with elderly and you'll see what I mean. Okay, so elderly is one of the keywords that I figured out based on the PICO, right? So I'm going to search MESH for elderly. And I get some results here. The top one is the word aged, a person 65 through 79 years of age. So that's probably the section I'm looking for, unless I want to do somebody older than 79, which is then they say is the term aged 80 and over. So that's a little bit more specific. But I think for our purposes, aged is probably what we're looking for. So aged and elderly, they mean the same thing. The only difference is that aged is the one term that PubMed has decided is the official term for that concept in their database. If we go ahead and click on aged, you can see a little bit more information about the term. It's loading here. Okay, so you can see a little bit more information. One of the things you can look at are entry terms. This is basically where, again, PubMed is trying to anticipate, when people type in, when people are thinking of the term aged, what other keywords are they most likely to think of to describe that? And they've got elderly listed here. So then if you typed in elderly in a PubMed search, PubMed would know that you mean aged because it's listed as an entry term. You can also see sort of a hierarchical tree of terms. So we see that aged is a more specific kind of adult, and aged 80 and over and frail elderly are more specific concepts under aged. So you can choose, if you want to, if one of the more specific topics applied, you would want to choose that instead. In this case, we're just going to stick with aged because we don't want to, our problem isn't specific enough that we need to specify 80 and over or that we need to specify frail. But it's a good tool to look at. You can see what's a broader term and what's a narrower term. There are also subheadings which you can play around with. I'm not going to do any in this example, but you can play around with some of your some subheadings here if you want to. We're looking at the term aged, and your question has to do with physiology or surgery on aged people, that sort of a thing. Ours does have to do with rehabilitation, but in this case we're not going to use it. Anyway, you can check mark one or more of these boxes. So now if I've decided, this is the term that I'm looking for, I can add it to the search builder, and you see it goes in right there. So our next term was low back pain. So now I'm going to type that one in and see what we get. And the mesh term for low back pain is low back pain. Sometimes it's that easy. So again, we've got subheadings. Again, we've got entry terms, a lot more entry terms for this than we had for aged. And we've also got several hierarchical tree under neurologic manifestations. Wait, why is that one different? Oh, pathological conditions, nervous system diseases, signs and symptoms. So different kind of trees showing relationships between this concept and other concepts. So that looks good. This is what we want. You can read the definition here, acute or chronic pain in the lumbar or sacral regions. Okay, so we're going to add that to the search builder. Our next concept was manual therapy. So we're going to search for that. And if you get something like this and you're like, well, is that really the same thing? You can always read the definition and see, is that what you had in mind? In this case, it looks good, so I'm going to add it to the search builder. And the final term that we had come up with was rehabilitation. So I'm going to search for that one. Several options on this. Restoration of human functions to the maximum degree possible in a person or persons suffering from disease or injury. That's the definition that we're looking for. That's the concept that we're talking about here. So I can check mark it. If I click on it here, I go to that same page with the trees and the entry terms and things like that. But if I know that that's what I want, I can just put a check mark and add it to the search builder. So once you've found the mesh term for each of your keywords and added them to the search builder, you can then click Search PubMed. So now when we're doing this, it's searching for all of the articles that have all 4 of these mesh terms in the mesh field. It's not looking at the article title fields, it's not looking at the author fields, it's only looking at the mesh terms, and it's only finding articles that include all 4 of these terms. So when I did this as a keyword search, what was it, 200 and something, 212 articles, I think, results that we got back, and by doing the mesh search, we got 21. And if we look through this, they're all going to be pretty spot on. Okay, I just got a notice that said I may be experiencing degraded audio quality. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I'm getting yeses, so I think GoToMeeting's going crazy here. All right, if you can still hear me, then that's good. Okay, so again, as I was saying, we got from 200 and something results down to about 21 results, and they're all 21 that have to do exactly with what we're looking for. So again, that could be a really great tactic for you if you feel that you need that. You won't always need it. I don't recommend starting with a mesh search. I always recommend starting with a keyword search, and then if you feel it's necessary to do a mesh search at that point, you could go from there. Any questions about doing a mesh search? It can be a little bit complex. Some of the concepts behind doing this with the controlled vocabulary and everything can be a little bit complex. Did that make sense to everybody? Yes? Okay. So the good news is that if we go, let me see, back here on the library's page to the PubMed page, there's a little link here to a video that NCBI, the people who, PubMed basically, did a video on searching with mesh. So if you need a refresher on this later, you can come and you can click this link and watch a video that shows building a mesh search just like I just did with you there. The downside of that is that it's not done by us, it's done by PubMed, so it's not going to be something that's specific to rehabilitation or something like that that we study at the University of St. Augustine. It's a very general sort of medical example, so it might not be as relatable, but it does show all of those steps of searching the mesh database, one term at a time, and adding those terms to the search builder and that sort of a thing. So that's how you do a mesh search. And it can be, like I said, it can be really useful to only have to look at 21 results as opposed to 200 results. It really helps in a lot of cases. Okay, so let me see. Did that. All right, so let's talk in the last couple of minutes. Actually, we're just about out of time, but if you hang on just a couple more minutes, I've got a couple of other advanced search tips for you. These are tips that I give to students if they feel that they don't have enough results. So the mesh searching is sort of a tactic to use if you're getting too many results. These are more search tips that you would use if you feel like you're not getting enough results. I'm doing this search and I'm only getting 10 results. What's up with that? I need more than 10. So these are some ways to dig a little bit deeper into the literature. One of the top tips that I have is to check the works cited list of articles that you've already found that fit your topic. If the authors are citing that article, it probably is very relevant to what that article is talking about, and therefore it's relevant to your topic. So that's a way, especially if you've got maybe if you've got a brand new sort of right off the press article, look at the works cited list, see what older works that person has cited, those authors have cited, and then you can look up those articles and read those articles. The opposite of that is what we call shepherdizing or citation indexing. And this is where you use an article that is older, maybe, again, an article that's a good fit for your topic, but maybe it's an older article, and when you shepherdize it, you find out since that article was published, what other publications have cited that article. The best way to do this is through Google Scholar, actually. So let me see if I can get an example. This one. Let's pull this one. It's not that old, so we won't get too many results probably, but it'll show you at least. So if we go to Google Scholar, I'm going to paste in that article title, hit search, and actually that's quite a few. There's always a link down here, cited by with a number. If you click on that, it'll give you a list of what publications have cited that article. So that's a good way to expand your search a little bit more. And you can also click this box and then do a search again and say, okay, within these articles, I only want to see things having to do with, geriatric or something like that, and narrow those down a little bit more, especially if you get quite a few results by doing that. So that's citation indexing. Both of these concepts together, as well as some other concepts, is called pearl gathering, because you're sort of taking clues and following clues to find other resources, like a string of pearls. You're sort of stringing pearls. So, for example, when you check the works cited list and that leads you to other articles, those articles could then lead you to other articles. If you do citation indexing, that'll lead you to other articles, and then those will lead you to other articles. So to give you an example, if I'm looking at the works cited list of a newer article, and within that works cited list is an older article, I can find that older article, and then I can shepherdize the older article and get a list of newer articles that also cite that article, and I'm sort of stringing those pearls. I'm finding, strategically sort of looking around in the literature, finding those pearls, those perfect articles that are perfect for my topic, and stringing them as I go along. So that's the term that we use for it, is pearl gathering. It sounds kind of fun, right? Maybe more fun than it actually is for non-librarians. So those are some tips. You can also, we were talking about there's different ways to talk about different concepts. So if you're not getting good results with one search, use synonyms, alternate names, or similar conditions, and redo your search, but swapping out one word. For example, this is one that I see a lot. There's a lot of abbreviations, right? So if, for example, you're looking at ACL reconstruction, you might put in your search, you might say ACL reconstruction. Oh, sure, that's the typical term, right? If you're not getting good results doing that, try spelling it out, anterior cruciate ligament reconstruction. Unless it's something really common like AIDS, then it's going to benefit you to search with both the abbreviation and with the word spelled out. So that's one example of ways that you can just be a little bit more creative with your searches. Do multiple searches, especially if you're doing very thorough research. You're going to do multiple searches. So use that to your advantage. Keep track even of what searches you've already done. This is where the MyNCBI account and PubMed comes in handy. I know I mentioned this during the basic webinar. Comes in handy because that saves every search that you've done, so you can go back and see, oh, I've already done this search, but let me try this one instead. So those are some advanced search tips that I have for you. And again, I said I was going to mention it, interlibrary loan. If there's ever an article that you can't get through our resources, please email library@usa.edu, include the full citation of the article that you need, and we'll email that article to you once we get it from another library, from a partner library. I encourage you to use this. It's a quick and easy service that we offer to our students and to our faculty. So I definitely encourage you to use interlibrary loan if there's an article that you need that we don't provide the full text to. What questions do you have on something that we've discussed or something that you were hoping I would discuss and I didn't? If you need to go, please go. It is about 5 minutes past time. But otherwise, I'll stay on until I exhaust your questions. You're very welcome, Naomi.